Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast has to do with human development and psychology to kind of try and help you figure out a little bit more about maybe why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about growth, and now we're going to start talking about nutrition. Most school children have good appetites and eat far more than younger children. To support their steady growth and constant exertion, children need on average 2,400 calories every day. And I know my son has had a little niece and nephew, and he's like, these kids eat so much. I would just bust if I had to eat all this food. And of course, they say kids are running around playing and, they can eat a lot. More for older children and less for younger ones. And I know when my boys were teenagers, I couldn't keep them fed. I mean, constant eating, snacking. I mean, it was crazy. Nutritionists recommend a varied diet, including plenty of grains, fruits, and vegetables, which are high in natural nutrients, and high levels of complete carbohydrates found in potatoes, pasta, bread, and cereals. And you want whole grain for the simple fact it's still got the nutrients. Your bleached out white bread, it has almost no nutrients. If you go look at the back of it, you'll see it's basically fluff. So you want your whole grains. Simple carbohydrates found in sweets should be kept to a minimum because all sugar is good for is energy. If you don't expend that energy, that sugar stays in your body. And that's what leads to diabetes. U.S. children of all ages eat too much fat and sugar, and artificially fortified or low nutrient foods. And, our neighbors to the south and north are starting to kind of do that too. They're picking up our bad habits. But when you go to the store, anything that you can buy fat-free or sugar-free, do it. Because it's just going to be better for you, better for your kids. Because all that extra fat is going to lead to heart disease. All that extra sugar is going to lead to diabetes. And those are the number 2 killers here in the United States. So if you go to the store, look for fat-free, look for sugar-free, buy it. And I do, and it doesn't taste any different. I mean, I've had a couple bad health scares, so, we switched the diet up. And at first, you might taste a little difference, but after a while, it's like this just is the same. Just it doesn't have the stuff in it that's going to kill me. So, you can have your cake and eat it too if it's sugar-free. To avoid overweight and prevent cardiac problems, young children should get only about 30% of their total calories from fat and less than 10% of their total from saturated fat, which are the bad fats. There's the good fats and the bad fats, and the saturated fat is the bad fat. Lean meat and dairy food should remain in the diet to provide protein, iron, and calcium. Now, I know there's people out there who are vegetarians or vegans, and they're going to say no on that you can use spinach or whatever. That's fine. That's your choice. What your diet is your choice. These are just guidelines that they recommend. Calcium, milk, and other dairy products can now be skim or low fat because they have that. Or, some of the other milks, which, there's a fight on even calling them milks, have that added to them so that they're also, got calcium and vitamin D and things. So, look at your labels. If you're not sure what's in something, look at your labels. Studies have found no negative effects on height, weight, body mass, or neurological development from a moderately low-fat diet. So see, you're not stunting your kids' growth. Excuse me. You're not making them dumb or anything like that by giving them a low-fat diet. And you might even be helping them not have heart attacks later on. Malnutrition. Nearly half, 46% of young children in South Asia, 30% in Sub-Saharan Africa, 8% in Latin America and the Caribbean, and 27% worldwide are believed to suffer from malnutrition. In the United States, 1 child in 5 did not get enough to eat. So, that's a shame. Here in America, where we have a glut of food, one of the richest countries, 1 in 5 kids don't get enough to eat. That's why we need these school lunch programs and breakfast programs. I don't even want to hear people saying, these deadbeats should get a job. I knew single mothers who were working 2, 3, 4 jobs and still having problems paying the bills because they weren't skilled workers, because they're, they didn't get to go to college or a job program or whatever. Parents didn't bother. So there are people who are trying to make a living and are still poor. So, I don't want to hear any of that crap. It's what it is crap. Because undernourished children usually live in poverty and suffer other kinds of environmental deprivation, the specific effects of malnutrition may be hard to isolate. However, taken together, these deprivations can affect not only growth and physical well-being, but cognitive and psychosocial development as well. Because when you're hungry, you're not worried about what's going on. You're not worried about what you're supposed to be learning. You're sitting there and your belly's eating itself. You're getting an ulcer. So, that stuff's not important. In an analysis of data on a nationally representative sample of 3,286 6 to 11-year-olds living in households, I don't know why they split that word. Those whose families lack sufficient food were more likely to have low arithmetic test scores, to have repeated a grade, to have seen a psychologist, and to have had difficulty getting along with other children. Oh my. So it does play a part in intelligence and behavior. Since malnutrition may affect all aspects of development, its treatment may need to go beyond physical care. One longitudinal study followed 2 groups of poor Jamaican children with low developmental levels who were hospitalized for severe malnourishment in infancy or toddlerhood. Healthcare professionals played with an experimental group in the hospital and, after discharge, visited them at home every week for 3 years, showing the mothers how to use homemade toys and encouraging them to interact with the children. A control group received only standard medical care. The mothers in the experimental group also enrolled their children in preschools at earlier ages than in the control group. Three years after the program stopped, the experimental group's IQ were well above those of the control group, though not as high as those of a third, well-nourished group, and their IQs remained significantly higher 7, 8, 9, and 14 years after leaving the hospital. So, again, put the effort into your kids. Take care of your kids. Do the best for the kids. I mean, when my kids were little and I was divorced, I did not want to get on food stamps. But there came a day where we had 1 burrito left until I got paid again. So that night before I got paid again, we split 1 burrito 4 ways. I just took a little corner, gave them the big, nice, meaty parts. And so the next day I went and I applied for food stamps so that I could feed my children healthy food, because I know that's important. And I did not want my children to, have growth or intellectual problems because I wasn't bringing in enough money working all the jobs I was working to keep them fed like they should have been. And, you know, any decent mother, that's what they would do. So anyone who's wanting to say about there's no need for these food stamp programs, blah, blah, blah. Dude, wake up. Wake up. Smack, smack, smack. There's a real world out there. You're in your protective bubble of money, imagining that these things aren't happening. Hello. Wake up to reality. Can schooling help counteract cognitive losses? One longitudinal study followed about 1,400 Guatemalan children in impoverished rural villages, many of whom had stunted growth due to malnutrition, who lived in excuse me, I just had to stop that a second ago because of the unsanitary infestation causing conditions. Those who completed at least 4 years of school did better on tests of cognition during adolescence than those who were dropped out early. However, it is quite possible that the children who stayed in school had better cognitive abilities to begin with than those who dropped out. So the schooling may not have been the cause of the greater cognitive development. And, you know, there are people who school's just not for them. I knew people who dropped out and got good jobs, you know, being construction workers and things like that, because school was just not for them. And that's the way with, you know, some people. So, you know, you can't say that everyone can benefit from higher education if they can't do the higher education, you know, if they have cognitive problems, if they have mental disabilities that keep them from being able to read and write efficiently, or do math. So, you know, they're noting that fact that it might not have been just that. So, obesity and body image. The incidence of obesity among U.S. children and adolescents is rapidly increasing. 15% of 6 to 11-year-olds are obese, compared with 11% in 1994. Obesity is most prevalent among Mexican American children, 24%, as compared with 12% of non-Hispanic white children and 20% of non-Hispanic black children. Like I said, they're picking up our bad habits. And if you go into the foreign food aisle and look at a lot of the Hispanic foods, there's a lot of sugar in them, even in, you know, stuff that you don't think about, you know, like ketchup and, you know, things. There's a lot of sugar. So they need to drop that bad habit that we gave them. Send them all them sweets. In Canada, the prevalence of obesity among 7 to 13-year-olds doubled between 81 and 96, from 5% to 13.5%. So our neighbors to the north, getting them bad habits too, you know, getting that sugar into everything, and that's something we need to stop, you know. Like I eat a lot of sugar-free foods, you know. You can have sugar-free ice cream. You can have sugar-free pudding, you know. It's harder to find. You have to look. And you can have sugar-free icing. Yes, there's sugar-free icing. And, you know, it's good. So, like I said, anything you can buy sugar-free, do it. You know, why kill yourself with diabetes? Obesity often results from an inherited tendency, aggravated by too little exercise and too much or the wrong kinds of food. So, your genes do play a part. If mom and dad was big, you're liable to be big. But you also have to eat the foods and not do any exercise to make you big, you know? I genetically had larger parents, but when I was younger, I was pretty thin, and I could eat anything I wanted, you know? I could eat 7 pieces of pizza and not put on any weight. But once I started having kids, and that estrogen level went up, them pounds kept staying on. And every time I would get pregnant, I would gain like 20, 30 more pounds. And the nurses would be like, oh, it'll come off after you have the baby. Well, it didn't. So, I was contributing to that. I wasn't eating right. I was trying to eat like I always had eaten, whatever I want. And then, once I developed osteosclerosis and osteoarthritis, and the doctors found it in 2004, I was told it's time to get a desk job. That you can't keep doing this or your bones are going to, fall apart. You got to take a desk job. So then I got the desk job. And then, of course, as we know, sitting at a desk doesn't burn off as many calories as working at a daycare, running around after kids all day. So, among the genes that seem to be involved in obesity is one that governs production of a brain protein called leptin, which seems to help regulate body fat. So, if in your genetic makeup there's that defect, chances are you're just going to get fat. It's a fact of life. You can do your best and eat right and exercise. But, some things genetics can mess you up on. Environment is also influential. Since children tend to eat the same kinds of foods and develop the same kinds of habits as the people around them. High body mass index and high blood pressure, both risk factors for heart disease, tend to be more common in African American and Mexican American children than in white children. And there's a lot of fat in the diet. Now, I've heard a lot of arguments between African Americans and doctors and things of that nature about how white people force them to eat this fatty food. Okay, when they were in slavery, that was probably true, but now they're not, and they don't have to. And Mexican Americans, they eat a lot of. You can get fat-free refried beans too, and you just need to look for that fat-free. It will save your life. I know I've lost recently just about 40 pounds. People are like, where from? But trust me, I know the difference. Because, like I said, after a couple little scares with the ticker, it's like we got to stop eating all this fat, So, fat-free is a thing. Take advantage of it. Inactivity may be a major factor in the sharp rise in obesity. For example, children who watch 4 or more hours of television each day have more body fat and a higher BMI than those who watch less than 2 hours a day. And that's usually because they're doing things. And, I let my kids watch TV, but we also had outside time. They had to go outside, and play. Because that's how they grow and, build a body. And, you can't sit in front of the tube all the time. And now I know people who do that. They sit in front of the tube all the time. And, they are heavier. They don't have as much energy. And I couldn't do it. There's no way I could sit and watch TV all day. I would go buggy. I mean, when I was sick, I wanted to be up doing things. That actually didn't work out to my advantage because, I bought a bunch of stuff while I was high on, drugs one day for my cold. But I just can't sit all day and watch TV. One of them people who's a little bit hyper, My goodness. And I just can't sit there all day. I can't do it. I'll never be the person that sits there and watches TV all day. But I know people who do it and are perfectly happy with it. Obese children often suffer from taunts from peers, and they must compensate by indulging themselves with treats, making their physical and social problems even worse, especially if they have overweight parents. They also tend to become overweight adults at risk of high blood pressure, heart disease, orthopedic problems, and diabetes. So, if you notice the kids getting a little chubby, you might want to encourage them to play outside more, to do more activities, tweak the diet a little bit. Because I know people who have died young eating what they love, and they're like, you got to die of something, but you don't have to. You don't. Why die in your 40s, 50s, 60s when you could be living up into your 80s, 90s, 100s, and enjoying your life? The problem is, if you get big and you get unhealthy, and you're going to go when it's your time to go. Your choice is stay active and then just drop dead one day, or sit around and waste away and then have to be taken care of for however long you got left. So, the choice is yours. For these reasons, a panel of pediatric obesity experts recommends that any child with a BMI of 95 percentile or higher, oh my goodness, be screened for possible treatment. Parents need to find constructive, blame-free ways to help children lose weight by encouraging physical activity and providing a wide variety of healthful, low-fat foods. And when I was younger, after every meal, I would have like a little Debbie, And you look at those calories and fat and sugar and those things now, and I'm like, dear God, we were killing ourselves and didn't know it. So yeah, definitely don't do that. Don't be giving them little Debbie snacks or whatever other snacks. I mean, they're good in their place, if like you have one for breakfast with a bowl of fruit, okay, that's fine, so you gotta keep the balance there. It's all about balance. And you gotta think about that when you're feeding your kids. If you're feeding them something that's not so good, you need to also feed them something that is good for them. There's got to be some balance there. Because the old saying is true, you are what you eat. So if you want your kid to be a marshmallow, feed them marshmallow all the time. But if you want your kid to be healthy, there's apples, oranges, grapes, things that you can feed them that they like, and are good for them. So you're the parent, you have to keep that balance going on. And as an adult, you have to do that for yourself. You can have that bready thing, but you also need to have that fruity thing for breakfast that goes with it, right? In a 12-week experiment with 10 obese 8 to 12-year-olds, those whose television viewing was limited to the amount of time they spent pedaling an exercise bike watched much less TV and showed significantly greater reduction in body fat than a control group. And I'm sure we've all seen that, where people have done that you have to pedal the exercise bike while you're watching TV. And I actually did that when I was younger. So, I was not really doing it for that reason. It's like I was bored, but I wanted to watch TV. So I'd ride the exercise bike while I was watching TV, Unfortunately, children who try to lose weight are not always the ones who need to do so. Concern with body image, how one believes one looks, becomes increasingly important toward the end of middle childhood, especially for girls, and may develop into eating disorders, become Get out of the screen here, get my tissues. Ain't quite well yet, I hate that. More common during adolescence. So if you notice your teenage girl getting thinner, you might want to talk to her about body image, because they believe what they see. So when they see these altered pictures on these magazines, where they've stretched the body, stretched the legs, shaved off a little here and there with the computer. Explain that to them, because we are normal people with normal bodies. We aren't created from a computer. We don't have these super long legs and super thin, waists and, excuse me. So, we need to keep an eye out for girls, especially because girls are mean to each other. They'll call each other names and, talk about how this is fat, that is fat. So you need to kind of keep an eye on the girls because they're usually the ones who develop eating disorders. So, motor development. Motor skills continue to improve in middle childhood. By this age, however, children in most non-literate and transitional societies go to work. And this, plus more household labor, especially for girls, leaves them little time and freedom for physical play. Okay. So, for these children, unfortunately, in some societies still in the world, I mean, it's getting better, but sometimes once a girl starts having, menses and a boy starts, having ejaculate, they are considered adults, when this is actually the beginning of their, adolescence, their maturation. It is seen as the end because this thing happened. Now we know that, you start becoming sexually mature around age 12 to 13 and finish up by 18, 20. So, in these societies, unfortunately, sometimes once this starts happening, they're considered a woman or a man, and married off and expected to have lives of their own, and they're not even physically done growing. So, this is a shame, but it's still something that occasionally happens in the world. In the United States, children's lives today are more tightly organized than they were when Anne Bancroft was camping out in her backyard. They spend less time in free, unstructured activities, such as rough and tumble play, and informal games, and more time in organized sports. And that's just really a matter of safety nowadays, because when my children were out playing in the backyard, there were two men who came in the backyard. And my oldest son was old enough, he was a teenager and came, "Hey, Mom, these dudes are coming in the backyard over the fence." So I came out there and let my dogs out there. My dogs quickly got them out of the backyard. But, I mean, here in the United States, it's not that safe anymore. You can't hardly leave your children alone without an adult or, adolescent thereby to watch them and trust that your children are still going to be there when you come out of the house. And now some people think that's like disaster thinking, but it's not. Because I've known children in this neighborhood I live in right now, I know of at least 3 who have had, snatch and grab. We have one down the road. And then we had 2 that were sexually harassed, by offenders that live in the area. So, organized sports is a way to get the child out and play, and have a life. Now, also, it's romanticized here in the U.S. You're going to have a football star, baseball star, whatever. But the good thing about sports is it gets the child exercising. And, oh my. Generally, children who play sports are thinner than those who do not. So, there's a trade-off there, in letting a kid be a kid and then, letting them play organized sports. So, my personal belief is, as long as you're not one of those crazy parents that you hear, oh my goodness, going off like a rocket, go get him, kill him, blah, blah, blah. Those people. And you're in it because your child enjoys it. And you enjoy watching your child play. That's why you should be in organized sports. And, you shouldn't be trying to make your child anything they don't want to be. I have seen people force their children. And then the child, when they're old enough, they quit. And they actually quit a lot of things in life. If they have that type of relationship. And they end up on their own somewhere doing something. They kind of get lost. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. And hopefully, you might have heard something today that might help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Until next time.